Welcome to our channel, Ielts Concept. Please subscribe for daily practice test. Ielts listening test.
The test is in 4-part, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
You will hear a man telephoning to ask about a job in a hotel. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, West Bay Hotel. Can I help you?
Oh, good morning. I'm ringing about your advertisement in the Evening Gazette.
Is that the one for temporary staff?
That's right.
Yes, I'm afraid the person who's dealing with that isn't in today, but I can give you the main details if you like.
Yes, please. Could you tell me what kind of staff you're looking for?
We're looking for waiters at the moment. There was one post for a cook, but that's already been taken.
Oh, right. What are the hours of work?
There are 2 different shifts. There is a day shift from 7 to 2 and a late shift from 4 till 11.
And can people choose which one they want to do?
Not normally, because everyone would choose the day shift, I suppose. You alternate from one week to another.
OK, I'm just writing all this down. What about time off?
You get 1 day off, and I think you can negotiate which one you want. It's more or less up to you, but it has to be the same one every week.
Do you know what the rates of pay are?
Yes, I've got them here. You get £5.50 an hour, and that includes a break.
Do I have to go home to eat, or...?
You don't have to. You can get a meal in the hotel if you want to, and there's no charge for it, so you might as well.
Oh, good. Yes, so let's see. I get £231 a week.
You'd also get tips. Our guests tend to be quite generous.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Is there a uniform? What about clothes?
Yes, I forgot to mention that. You need to wear a white shirt, just a plain one, and dark trousers. You know, not green or anything like that. And we don't supply those.
That's okay, I've got trousers. I just have to buy a couple of shirts. What about anything else? Do I need a waistcoat or anything?
You have to wear a jacket, but the hotel lends you that.
I see. One last thing. I don't know what the starting date is.
Just a minute. I think it's sometime around the end of June. Yes, the 28th, in time for the summer.
That's great. I'm available from the 10th.
Oh, good. Well, if you can call again, you need to speak to the service manager. Her name's Jane Irwin. That's Urwin. And she'll probably arrange to meet you.
OK. And when's the best time to ring?
Could you call tomorrow? She usually starts checking the rooms at midday, so before then if you can, so she'll have more time to chat. I'll just give you her number because she's got a direct line.
Thanks.
It's 832-009.
823-009.
832.
Oh, OK. Yes, I'll do that.
And by the way, she will ask you for a reference, so you might like to be thinking about that. You know, just someone who knows you and can vouch for you.
Yes, no problem. Well, thanks very much for your help.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear a tour guide talking to a group of visitors about Bestley Castle. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to Bestley Castle. It's nice to see so many of you here today. Before we go in, I'd like to tell you some information about the castle, the things to see and do, and the facilities available to you in the grounds. We'll do our best to make this a truly memorable visit. Now, the castle grounds are quite big, and we don't want you to get lost, so I'm going to give you an idea of the layout. At the moment, we are at the entrance, and immediately to our left is the Tourist Information Office. Go here if you need any questions answered. They'll be happy to help. And of course, behind the tourist office is the car park where the coach dropped you off. And he'll also pick you up from the same spot at 5 p.m. today. In front of us are the water gardens. If you stroll through, you get to the North Bridge, which is the entrance to Bestley Castle. Take your time and enjoy looking around the castle. There's a lot of history steeped in those walls. As you leave the castle via the South Bridge, you'll be greeted with the sight of roaming deer. During the day, there will be scheduled feeding opportunities where visitors can get involved. However, we do request that you do not feed the deer outside these times. To the right of the deer park is the Castle Museum, and behind that is our award-winning restaurant. It's a relatively new addition to the castle grounds, but is fast gaining a reputation for its food. Alternatively, you can choose to dine in the picnic area on the other side of the deer park. It's perfect for the family as it's next to the kids' play area and homemade ice cream hut. We hope that on your way out, you'll pop into the gift shop by the exit for something to remember us by.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Admission to the grounds is free for all. That includes the museum, gardens, and picnic area. There is an admission fee for the castle, which is £6.50 for adults, with a 10% discount for students and retired people. Children under the age of 16 pay half adult price, and under 8 go in free. There are many spectacular events throughout the year, and for most of them, there's also an admission fee. As these events are in high demand, it's a good idea to book well in advance. Some of the exciting events planned for this year are the Summer Medieval Festival, where you can watch old-fashioned nights and experience a feast in the halls of the castle, as if you were a guest of King Henry VIII himself. There are several concerts planned this year too, including a rock concert at an admission price of £10 per person and a special jazz concert which is free to the public. I'm sure you'll agree that all tastes and ages will be satisfied. One scary but extremely popular event is the annual Haunted Castle event at the end of October, where the castle comes alive at night. Why don't you come along if you're brave enough? Another sight to see is the fantastic firework display on November 5th, and the cost of that includes refreshments. We also have a long tradition of raising money for charity. The The charity event held every year on the first day of May will this year be an archery contest. Entrance is free, but donations are certainly welcome. This year, we'll be collecting money on behalf of a charity for elderly people, Age Concern. Just in case you can't remember all of that, you can pick up a leaflet showing the timetable and prices for all events from the Tourist Information Desk. You can also go online to get this information from our website.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear two students called Katie and Harry discussing a project they are both working on. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Harry.
Katie, hi. Look, let's sit down and work out what we've got to do for this next project we've got for the geography course. I'm glad we're doing it together. We should be able to split it between us so it's not too much work.
Yes, Harry. I had quite a long chat about it with Dr. Smith yesterday, so I've got quite a good idea of how we should be organising it. Now, he said we've got to move on from the general project we did on soil erosion and look specifically at coastal change. I think that'll be interesting, don't you?
Yeah. I was thinking about it last night because we'll have to make sure we pick our days to visit the beaches. It seems there's a reasonable train service to White Sands Bay, but the weather could stop us from getting all the samples we need. It could take us longer than we think.
Yeah, but we could save ourselves some time if we try to get hold of any information that's already been collected. I know several postgraduates who have done stuff in White Sands Bay this year, though on other topics. We could check out what the marine biology unit have got. They're bound to have something we could use.
OK. Let's do that this week and arrange to go to the beach next week. I think we'll need about 3 days. If we book ahead, we can probably stay in the university lodge when we're down there. The other thing is, we must go to the Environment Agency and get permission to take the samples, just in case anyone challenges us when we're down there. I think we'll have to fill out a form or something.
Right, Harry. Now, let's work out who's going to do what first, because we have to get it done by the end of this month. I think we ought to divide up the data collection between us.
What? So only one of us goes to the beach, do you mean?
No, I think we both ought to get a picture of what's involved, but there's no need for us both to do everything. I mean, when we're at the beach, you could go to both ends and make sure we have the set of shots we need to illustrate where erosion has taken place.
OK, fine.
And I'll move up the beach and pick up the different stones and put sand in bags. Does that seem fair to you?
Yeah, OK. Then what about the other stuff? Do you want me to go and do the questionnaires while you're on the beach? We'll get more people that way. Or is it better if we do them together?
I think that would be better. We could set aside a whole day for it.
What about the lab work? Looking at what we've collected and testing it?
I don't mind doing it, but I'm pretty slow.
OK, you can leave that to me.
Fine.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Then that leaves us 2 weeks to write it up ready for the presentation to the class on the 29th. Shall we do the presentation together? Like you do the first bit and me the second? Actually, no, I think that can be a bit muddling for the class. I'd like to do the presentation, if you don't mind.
Fine by me.
It's just that it won't affect the marks that you get. I mean, it's not like I get more for actually doing it. The tutor will judge it as a whole. But I think I remember them saying at the beginning of the year that we were expected to do 3 before the end of the year in order to get a satisfactory mark. And I'm 1 behind, whereas you've already done yours, haven't you? I can see why they put them into the course, because most interviews for jobs demand you do a presentation nowadays.
Yeah. Does that mean I have to write it up? I think it'll be impossible to do that together.
Yes, you're very good at that.
Oh, yes. Typical that I get landed with it as usual. Actually, I don't mind. I know we haven't got very long, but that's okay. Often I write better when I'm pushed for time. It focuses the mind. But I'll have to have a think about how we present the data, because that won't be straightforward like the rest. So I'd like a bit of help with that.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, I was thinking, after we've done the presentation, I think it'd be a good idea if we asked our classmates to tell us what they think of our conclusions.
Well, I don't know. They won't have done the research, so whatever they say would be uninformed.
I don't agree. I mean, they've all worked on something similar, so they know what's involved, and it would be useful to see how they think ours stands up. We'll have to be sure of our ground, make sure we don't make any mistakes in our results or whatever. I don't mean I think they're going to tell us anything new, just give us their thoughts on the process.
Okay. Then I'll deal with the questions at the end. Dr. Smith said we would have to prepare thoroughly for this, and I'll probably get lots of background stuff in the process of writing up, so I'll be prepared for any surprises. If he's impressed by your presentation, then we should do well.
Right.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer talking about food preservation. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 37. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 37.
In today's lecture, I'd like to look at the topic of food preservation and start by asking the obvious question, why do we need to preserve food? Well, apart from keeping it fresh for our daily needs, many foods, such as fruit and vegetables, are only available at certain times of the year. So if we want to be able to eat these foods all year round, we need to preserve them. We also need to preserve food for export overseas to make sure that it doesn't perish in transit. And lastly, we need to be able to preserve food for when there are food shortages. There are a number of methods of preserving food which involve both high and low temperatures, chemicals, irradiation, and drying. Let's have a look at these in turn. In the 1870s, the French scientist Louis Pasteur showed that microorganisms in food could be destroyed by raising the temperature of the food, a process now known as pasteurization. This involves heating milk to just 65 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. A new method, the ultra-high temperature, or UHT process, involves heating milk to 150 degrees Celsius for 3 seconds. The advantage of treating milk in this way is that it lasts much longer, though I tend to feel, and I'm sure many of you would agree, that taste is somewhat sacrificed in the UHT process. Tin cans were first used in the early 1800s to store and preserve food. Just as they are now, the cans were tin-plated steel containers, and the process had the advantage of being cost-effective. Unfortunately, however, there were many early cases of food poisoning because the canning process was not fully understood at that stage. We now know the exact temperature and length of time each food needs for proper preservation, which has greatly reduced the risk of food poisoning. People living in cold climates often preserve food by burying it in the snow, and the Romans knew all about the advantages of packing food in ice. But for most people, this was not an option until the invention of the refrigerator in 1834. Today, however, refrigeration is the most important means of preserving food because the food stays fresh without needing to be treated. However, refrigeration requires an electricity supply, and unfortunately, if the power goes off, so does the food. A variety of chemicals can be added to food, and you'll find their names listed on the labels of cans and bottles. Salt is probably the oldest of all the chemical preservatives and was used by many ancient civilizations for many years. Sugar also acts as a preservative and is used to preserve jams in much the same way that vinegar is used to pickle foods. Chemical preservatives are effective, but they do not suit all foods, and the processes involved are time-consuming. Another method of preserving food is by drying it. Most foods are 75% to 90% water, so if you remove the water, the microorganisms simply can't survive. When food is dried, it not only lasts a long time, but it also becomes much lighter, which is a big advantage as this makes it cheap to store. Though some people argue that valuable nutrients are lost in the process.
In the second part, the speaker describes the process of drying food. Look at questions 38 to 40. Now listen carefully and label the diagram.
Early methods for drying food involved cutting it into strips and hanging it in the sun or over fires. But there are now a number of more modern methods which involve the use of recent technology. One of these is known as roller drying, and it's a highly effective way of making dried foods from liquids, such as soup. Have a look at this diagram to see how it works. Well, first of all, the hot soup is poured in at one end here. The liquid spreads to form a thin layer on a heated belt. The liquid dries as it moves along. By the time it reaches the end of the belt, all the water has evaporated, leaving only dry powder. A blade then scrapes the dried material off the roller, and captures it in powder form. All you have to do is add boiling water, and you have your hot soup back again, ready to drink. Another method is called freeze-drying, and for those of you who still remember...
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to your Ielts listening answer sheet.